Hello fellow readers, I'm Stephanie and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to recap all the books that I read in June and July, and I wanted to do a little bit of a challenge and see if I can do a review in like one phrase for each book. But before we get started with the books, I just wanted to run through some of my stats for the months so you had an idea what we're going into. First, in June I read 19 books, which was about 6,000 pages. Most of the moods were kind of more deep and reflective, so I have like top categories as emotional, reflective, lighthearted, and so on. As it was Pride Month and I did a lot of Pride related videos, my largest section by far is LGBTQIA+, and then in addition to that I have a lot of contemporary romances, some young adults, and then some other categories as well. Most of the books were a medium pace, not as many fast-paced books in this month. There was only like one book or so that I read over 500 pages, but majority of them were 300 to 499, and I did have a big chunk under 300 as well. This month I did read a couple of non-fictions, so you can see that here, but most of them were fiction. Format, I mostly did about 50%, half in audio books, and then I also did another third, a little bit over a third in print, very few digital. My average rating for the month was 3.54, which is unfortunately not the best. And then as you can see, my pages that I read throughout the month, I had a couple of spikes, a couple of days where I definitely didn't read anything according to this, and you know, just a bunch of lulls as well. So if we look at July next, I read 15 books in July, which was about 5.5 thousand pages. This chart is a lot more spread than the June one. Like, I am kind of surprised how many moods are on here, but it looks like a majority of them, the largest portion is mysterious, emotional, dark, challenging, and adventurous. So that's an interesting stat. I feel like some of those like phrases haven't really come up on my reading so far, so I'm intrigued to see what books kind of fit those prompts. Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that feminism was a genre on Storygraph, but apparently it is. So I definitely understand that with what I've been reading. And then up there with feminism is fantasy, contemporary, again, a couple more LGBTQIA and other ones as well. There's definitely some on here that I don't know if I've ever marked before. So like I have dystopian, sociology, magical realism, science, politics, health, essays. Like, those are all genres that I don't know if I've actually had any books in before according to Storygraph, so that's really interesting that I'm like getting all these new genres as well. Pace, again, a lot medium. I must have had like one book that was slow and a couple that were fast, but like a majority of them were at medium pace. Looks like most of my books were in that 300 to 499 range, and just a couple under 300 pages. Again, I had a couple of nonfictions, but mostly fiction books. Next, I have the format of the book. Interestingly, I feel like most of the time, most of my books are audio, but this time, 2/3 of my books are actually print, so that's super interesting. And then a little bit better than June, my average rating is 3.88. And then finally, my pages in June, you can see that chart. I definitely have some bigger spikes, and again, sections where I don't have any pages that I recorded, so very interesting. Now that we've been through my overview of these months, I will start getting into all of the books themselves. I started the month off with Blood Scion. When I was reading this, it definitely felt long, but it dealt with a lot of like really harder topics. Like, this book is a lot about using children in like war, and there is like a magical element as well, which made it interesting, but it still was like kind of hard to read with all the child violence. But overall, this was a really good read, and I really enjoyed how the world was created. Next book I read was Dating Dr. Dill. This one is another romance, and what we have is actually like an Indian couple that meet on TV, since one of our main characters is like a doctor on TV and like hosts his own show. And so it was very fun and interesting. It was just like a solid romance. Nothing much more to say about that. The next book I have is Kaikeyi. This book is amazing. I enjoyed my reading of this so much. This is a feminist retelling of like Hindu gods, and we are following our main character Kaikeyi, who was the mother to one of the like biggest gods, and I just absolutely adored this book. It was super like long in comparison to what I normally read, but it was so good, and at no point was I like, this is really long. And so I just actually enjoyed my entire reading of this. If you're interested in hearing me talk more about this book, I did discuss it a lot in my mid-year freakout video, so I'll leave that down below. The next book was Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me, and I did discuss this a little bit more in my recreating the pride flag TBR video, so I won't get too deep into it now. You can check out that video down below, but overall I was hoping for a more cuter like graphic novel, but it took a long time for the main character to like really find herself, and so it just wasn't my favorite. The next book I read is the Hacienda. This one is like a fun read. It is like historical. It's got a bit of a mystery. We've got a bit of like a haunted house kind of vibes, and so that's what you can expect in this book. It wasn't my favorite book that I've read this year, but it was a good time. The next book I read is The Tomorrow Will Be Different. Again, I read this for my Pride Flag video, so you can check out my deeper thoughts in that video. But basically this is a mix of like a memoir about trans rights, and like because the author was very relevant in like politics and stuff like that, we actually get a lot of history about the politics around trans rights. And so I thought this was such a good way to learn. It is in a memoir format, and so it's a nonfiction that's like easier to digest. And so I just really enjoyed this book. Again, for my Pride Flag video, I read Love and Other Disasters. This one was a super cute romance. It kind of gave me vibes of like a queer British Bake Off with a romance in it, and so that was super cute. One of our main characters is like non-binary, and that is like an important part to the story and like the cooking competition, and so I just loved the representation, and it was a cute romance, so can't complain. The next book I have is Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World, and I would say it's hard to rate this because I liked the first book like back when I was in middle school when I initially read it, and unfortunately like this book just like didn't hit the same when I'm older, and so I wasn't as like attached to it. And most of the book, our main two characters are like separated. However, I would say the audiobook was read by Lin-Manuel Miranda, and when I initially heard his voice, I was like, yes. If you want more of my thoughts on this book, I do have it in my Pride Flag video. The next book I read was Below Zero. This was, I think, the third of the novellas that Ali Hazelwood was putting out this year, and all I gotta say is get steamy to beat the cold. However, it was my third of the three. The next book I read was Nothing Burns as Bright as You. When reading this book, sorry if you can hear the construction outside, they're really loud and annoying. Anyways, while I was reading this book, I just like could feel all of the emotions that our main character was feeling. This deals a lot with like coming to terms with your sexuality. It's very descriptive. It's like written in more of a prose type of format, and so I just like, it was so quick to read, it was so emotional, and like overall, I just really enjoyed it. Again, I did read this one for the Recreating the Pride Flag with my reading video, so if you want more information, you can check that out. Another one of those little novellas that as Ali Hazelwood was putting out, I did read Under One Roof as well. Again, just another quick, cute romance. This one was my second favorite out of the three. The next book I read is The Last Thing He Told Me. This book is like a mystery really revolved around family, and this book helped me realize that I don't think I love more realistic feeling mysteries. I like want my mysteries to be like so dramatized that like it's not believable and like just so dramatic. So I didn't love this one, but I definitely think it's a me thing because I have plenty of other friends and like other people who I know that have enjoyed this book. So if you're interested in it, I think you should still go for it. I think it just wasn't for me. The next book I read was Boyfriend Material, and again, you can see this in my Pride Flag video, but basically I went into it hoping it was going to be red, white, and royal blue, and it wasn't. So I was a little bit disappointed. The next like 4 books are all in my Pride Flag video, so if you're interested in seeing more about them, you can check that out, but I just don't want to repeat it over and over and over. So anyways, Marvelous Light. This was like an old time England, like little bit of magic in the world kind of book, and I feel like for most of it I was actually kind of bored. I like wanted more of the magic. I wanted more from the characters, and it just like wasn't my perfect book. So that was a little bit unfortunate. Next book was I Kissed Shara Wheeler. I loved the idea of this book because basically it was one of the girls who like went missing left a bunch of like clues, and like a team of other people had to like go around trying to find those clues, which would lead them to the next clue and the next clue. And I love that idea, but unfortunately I just like was kind of annoyed by the main characters, and so I just could not get into it. I definitely enjoyed like some of the side characters more than the main characters, and that was just a shame. The next book I read was Honey Girl. I think I went into it with the wrong expectations. I do think it was a good story, but because I was going into it hoping for a rom-com and it was more like deep, like working on yourself kind of vibes, it kind of disappointed me, and that was 100% my own fault for going in with different expectations. Like I said, this was a really good book and I'm glad that I read it, but it just definitely, if you're gonna go into this, expect that it's not a rom-com, because it was not. The next book I read was In the Dream House, and this book was so unique. I feel like I haven't read anything like it previously, and basically it's just like a really emotional memoir told in a bunch of like short story metaphors. And so each little short story is like the dream house as blank. So it's like taking all these different like tropes and stuff like that, and like I said, using that as like a metaphor for like what was occurring in her life. And it was just so good, and it does deal with like a lot of like domestic abuse, so it's not a book for everybody, but if you can read it, I would highly suggest it. It was a really good read. The next book I read was Hide, and this was for like the Literally Dead book club. Unfortunately, it wasn't it. I loved this idea of like a spooky carnival and like just those vibes, but like it ended up being so uneventful and I just didn't care. So that was a shame. The next book I read was The Charm Offensive. This book I kind of had mixed feelings with, because I loved the premise, and once we got to the ending, I was feeling for the characters, but like I just didn't care along the way, and like some of the things were just like annoying or like just overly done. And so I didn't love the entire path that we took in this romance, but at the end I was rooting for the couple. So I don't know if that means it was successful or not. I did talk about this one in the mid-year freakout as well, but my one sentence recap is just going to say that this book is so beautiful both inside and out. It's like whimsical and it has beautiful imagery and just, it's such a good book. So I would highly suggest this one, and if you're interested in learning more about it, you can check out my mid-year freakout. The next book I read was the Atlas 6. I know this has like been blown up for a while and I just got to it. I did really enjoy it. I wouldn't say that this is like my perfect fantasy, but it's like a darn good time. I would suggest this, and I am excited to read the next book as well. The next book I read was Red Clocks. This one is kind of like a fictional dystopian. Basically, we are in a world where there's a lot of laws about having children or, you know, adoption, all those kind of topics. And the interesting thing about this one is that you get so many different perspectives. So like you have an individual who wants to get rid of her child, you have an individual who wants to adopt but can't, you have individuals who are having fertility issues, and like all these different views in the book. And so it was really interesting to like see more from stories that I don't typically hear about. I did talk more about this in my feminism vlog, so you can check out that video down below. The next book I read was Finlay Donovan Knocks Him Dead, and this book, I would say it's not as good as the first book, but it was a really fun time still, and the characters are so much fun still, so it was definitely worth the read. The next book I read was Book Lovers, and overall I would say this is not my kind of romance. It's definitely more, I feel like, about the sisters and like them repairing their relationship, or like them dealing with like their kind of differences rather than the actual romance part of it. So if you're more interested in like a romance that has a lot of like personal drama in it, then this might be for you. But when I go into my romance, I want like a rom-com. So this was not it. Definitely like 120% though, this was a Hallmark movie. The next book I read was Lock Every Door, and overall this was just a really good thriller. The ending like definitely had me for a loop. I could not have expected it, but I will be posting a video soon where I talk more about this, so keep an eye out for that video. The next book I read was Bodies on the Line. Again, I read this for my feminism video, so you can check it out there if you want more information, but overall this book was amazing. It gives a lot of history on the topic. It gives a lot of personal stories. Like, it literally had me bawling. Like, this book was just worth it. 20 out of 10. Definitely loved it. Very similar to my feelings on the last one. I loved this one as well. Again, it was freaking amazing. It has like a good balance of like academic study kind of language and facts, as well as a mixture of personal stories as well. So I love this one as well. Again, I read it for my feminism vlog, so if you want to see more about my thoughts on this, then you can check that out, but definitely highly suggest. It was good. Now, I have not talked about this one previously, but I am absolutely obsessed with it, so this one might be a little bit longer of a review. I absolutely loved this book. This book is about 3 older women who are realizing that they have like some magical powers, and there's a little bit of a mystery in here. There's like a revenge plot, like just everything. Let me just tell you the vibes of this book. It's like a feminist revenge story. It's like out here calling out sexism. We have the older protagonist. We have morally gray characters. There's murder. There's magic. It's like literally everything you could ever want. Definitely some of the things I was thinking is like it's similar to like The Last Apothecary or They Never Learn, even though I've never read that. I haven't read that book yet, but it just sounds similar. So like if you like those vibes, this book was amazing. I honestly might have to just like do a separate video or like something else about this book because I loved it so much. It is a bit longer, but like it was so worth it. So like I literally cannot. I loved this book. The next book that I have is This Vicious Grace. This one is basically about our main character who has like basically powers that can amplify other people's powers, but she keeps like accidentally killing her husbands because of that, and so she has like a bodyguard who protects her, and then there's like a little bit of like bodyguard romance trope. Unfortunately, when I was first like in the first half of this book, I definitely was feeling like, oh, like this is why I don't read YA fantasy anymore, even though I still read a lot of YA fantasy, but like this is why it's like I'm growing out of it. It was like very slow and just like I couldn't really get into it, but it definitely got better at the ending. The next book I read was Yerba Buena, and literally just one sentence, it's very dark for being such a bright and pretty cover. Don't expect a romance from this one. Despite that, I did still enjoy reading it. Just like manage your expectations, you know? The next book I read was You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty, and I was so excited for this book. Like both the original cover and this cover, like absolutely stunning. It came in the Illumicrate like Afterlight box with a bunch of amazing goodies, and I was like, okay, this is gonna be the vibe. And honestly, I feel like I was tricked into reading this book. Like you really jump right into the beginning, and if you've read the beginning, like you know what I mean. It was a little TMI, too much description. And also like when I read the description of this, it says like, oh, she falls in love with the one guy who's off limits on her like tropical vacation. And spoiler, but it was the father. She fell in love with his dad. And I just like was not expecting that. I know there were times where I'm like, okay, this is like, they're actually being like considerate of each other. They're like actually communicating, like all these really positive things in the relationship. But I still just like couldn't get past the fact that the off limits guy is literally the initial love interest's dad. I haven't read any other books like that. I know there are books like that, and I would be willing to give them the try, but I feel like I was just so unprepared for this that I was like, oh, okay, that happened. Anyways, I don't think I have a lot of good thoughts about this book, so if you want a more information, you might want to check someone else's video, because I was just still taken aback by everything. The next book I have is Together We Burn. In a recap, this book is basically all about like flamenco dancing and like bullfighting, but like instead of bulls, it's dragons. So it was like a very interesting theme. Overall, I thought it was a pretty good book. The next book I read was The Last Time I Lied. Again, this is going to be coming in an upcoming video, so keep an eye out for that. But overall, this gave me like a camp thriller, and I just loved the vibes of it. So if you're interested in a good spooky time, I would definitely suggest checking this book out. The last book that I read in these months was Rage Becomes Her. Again, this is in my feminism vlog, so you can check it out, more information there. But my one quote for this is Rage Becomes Her, and it definitely made me angry. So I think it was successful. All right, so that was a brief recap for all of the books that I read in June and July. I hope you enjoyed this challenge, and if you have any ideas of other ways that I can try to make my wrap-ups fun in like another challenge or something like that, please let me know down below. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe down below. It would really mean so much to me. And until next time, keep reading!